The twins stumbled upon something that stopped them in their tracks. A house, hidden deep in the forest. But this was no ordinary house. It was made entirely of Nigerian pastries. It was a bizarre, almost dreamlike vision. The walls were made from chin-chin, the tiny crunchy squares of fried dough that were a favorite snack. The roof was made from puff-puff, golden brown balls of fried batter. The windows were framed with kuli-kuli, a peanut-based treat. And the door was made from akara, crispy fried bean cakes. The aroma of the pastries filled the air, making their mouths water. Onuora, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Adaiba whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Onuora nodded, equally stunned. It's a house made of pastries, he said, almost in disbelief. This can't be real. Oh, but the house was real. It was very real. Fascinated and starving, they approached the edible house. The smell of the fried donuts was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the earthy scents of the forest. As they stood there, taking in the sights and the delicious smells, the door creaked open, and an old, wrinkly woman stepped out. She was small and hunched, with a headscarf tied tightly around her head, and her eyes glowed with a strange light. "Welcome, my children," the old woman said, her voice soft and inviting. Welcome to the Panafricantales channel, and you're invited to subscribe and like. Onwalofumbasi. Once upon a time, in the heart of Nigeria, where ancient forests stretch over the land, two twin hikers, Adaiba and her brother Onuora, set off on an adventure that would change their lives forever. They were experienced explorers, always looking for something new, and this time they joined a group of other hikers to explore the dense and mysterious forest of Cross River. This forest was famous for its beauty and its secrets, with stories of strange creatures and hidden treasures passed down through generations. The twins looked alike, but their personalities were different. Adaiba, the older by just a few minutes, was bold and brave and audacious, always ready to face any challenge. Onuora, on the other hand, was thoughtful and careful. Together, they made the perfect team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. As the group of hikers went deeper into the forest, the dense plants began to hide the trail. The air was filled with the smell of earth and plants, and the sounds of distant birds and insects. The trail became more treacherous, with roots and vines tripping them at every step. But the twins refused to give up. They kept pushing forward with the thrill of adventure driving them. Hours passed, and the forest began to transform before their very eyes. The trees grew taller and more twisted, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was cooler here, and there was an eerie silence that gave them goosebumps. It was then that they realized that they had become separated from the rest of the group. "Adaiba, I think we've lost the others," Onuora said, his voice filled with worry as he looked around, trying to find any familiar landmarks. Adaiba frowned, her adventurous spirit dampened for a moment. "We must have taken the wrong turn somewhere," she admitted, looking around. "But don't worry, Onuora. We have each other, and I'm sure we can find our way back." They decided to keep moving, hoping to find a path that would lead them back to the group. As they walked, the forest seemed to grow even more mysterious, with strange shapes and shadows moving in between the trees. They could no longer hear the sounds of other hikers, only the whispering wind and the rustling of leaves. Lost and alone, The twins pressed on, their fear hidden by a stubborn determination. The dense plants and the fading light created a haunting atmosphere. And just as they began to feel the hunger pangs growing in their stomachs, the twins stumbled upon something that made them stop in their tracks. A house, hidden deep in the forest. But this was no ordinary house. It was made of Nigerian pastries. It was bizarre, almost dreamlike. The walls were made from puff-puff, golden brown balls of fried batter. The windows were framed with kuli-kuli, a peanut-based snack, and the door was made from akara, crispy fried bean cakes. The aroma of the pastries filled the air, making their mouths water. Onuora, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Adaiba whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Onuora nodded, equally stunned. It's a house made of pastries, he said, almost in disbelief. This can't be real. Oh, but the house was real. It was very real. Fascinated and starving, they approached the edible house. The smell of fried dough was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the earthy scents of the forest. As they stood there, taking in the sight and the delicious smells, the door creaked open, and an old woman stepped out. She was small and hunched, with a headscarf tied around her head, and her eyes glowed with a strange light. "Welcome, my children," the old woman said, her voice soft and inviting. She invited them in with a warmth that did not match her strange appearance. "You look tired and hungry. Batanimuno, come inside and rest. I have plenty food and warmth for you. I'm sure you're very tired. Come in, come in." The twins hesitated, but the sight of the house and the smell of the pastries were too tempting to resist. Their hunger clouded their judgment, and they exchanged a quick glance before nodding. "Thank you, Ma," Adaiba said, her voice full of gratitude. "We've been walking for hours and hours, and we're very hungry." The old woman smiled, but there was something in her smile that made Onuora uneasy. Come in, Bata, come in," she urged, holding the door open wider. The twins stepped inside, and the interior of the house was just as remarkable as the outside. It was like a wonderland of sweets and snacks. Tables were filled with akara, moi moi, and other delicious foods. The walls were lined with shelves holding even more pastries, buns, meat pies, donuts, and more, all arranged neatly. A fire crackled in a hearth made from suya skewers, and the air was warm and cozy. A large table in the center of the room was covered with even more food, and the twins' eyes widened in amazement. "Please, come, sit, eat," the old woman said, pointing to the table. "You must regain your strength. The journey back home is very long." Adaiba and Onuora sat down. Hunger overcame their doubts, and they indulged in the feast. The food was delicious, even better than they had imagined. They ate and ate and ate, their hunger driving them to consume more than they had ever before. But as they ate, the old woman's smile grew wider, and her eyes flashed with a strange satisfaction. She watched them with a curious intensity that made Onuora pause mid-bite. Ma, this food is wonderful," Onuora said, trying to hold his growing unease. "But we should really be getting back to our group. They'll be worried about us." The old woman's smile faded, and her expression grew cold. "You are going nowhere," she said, her voice now laced with a sinister tone. "You've entered my home, and now you belong to me." Before the twins could react, the old woman waved her hand, and the door slammed shut with a loud bang. The room darkened, and the once warm and inviting atmosphere turned gloomy. The pastries on the table began to rot and decay. The smell turned foul. The twins jumped to their feet. Oh, but it was too late. Too late. The old woman muttered a spell, and Onuora was paralyzed, unable to move. "Onuora!" Adaiba screamed, but her brother couldn't respond. The old woman laughed as she waved her hand again, and a cage made from thick twisted bones appeared out of thin air. The cage trapped Chidi inside. "You're going to make a very delicious meal," the old woman hissed, her voice now raspy and cruel. "I will fatten you up nicely, just like a fat goat ready for slaughter." Adaiba's heart raced as she watched the old woman turn her attention to her. She knew she had to act quickly if she was to save her brother. Summoning all her courage, Adaiba lunged at the old woman, but the witch was way more agile than she looked. With a flick of her wrist, she sent Adaiba crashing to the floor. "Oh, don't worry, you small rat. It's turn by turn," the witch sneered. "I have plans for you too, so don't be in a haste." The witch immediately began to chant, her voice growing louder as she prepared another spell. But Adaiba, determined not to give up, spotted a large iron pot bubbling over the fire. Steam rose from the pot, and she could feel the heat from where she lay. An idea began to form in her mind, and she knew she had to act fast. As the witch focused on her spell, Adaiba crawled toward the pot, staying low to avoid being noticed. The witch was so absorbed in her chanting that she didn't see Adaiba getting closer. Finally, when Adaiba was within the reach of the pot, she ceased her chants. With all her strength, Adaiba pushed the pot over, sending boiling water spilling across the floor. The scalding liquid splashed onto the witch's legs, and she let out a wild scream. The spell was broken, and Onuora collapsed to the floor as the cage disappeared. "You stupid girl!" the witch screamed, her face twisted with pain and rage. She turned to Adaiba, her eyes blazing with fury. "Oh, you will pay for this, young woman. You will pay." Oh, but Adaiba wasn't finished. Using all her strength, she grabbed a nearby stick and struck the witch with all her might, knocking her off balance. The witch stumbled backward, her hands waving as she tried to regain her footing. But the floor was slick with boiling water, and she slipped, falling headfirst into the pot. The witch's screams echoed through the house as she disappeared into the boiling water. But soon, the screams stopped, and the pot bubbled quietly once more. Adaiba, panting with effort, rushed to her brother's side. Onuora was shaking, but unharmed. "Adaiba, you saved me," he whispered, his voice full of gratitude and disbelief. "We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here," Adaiba said urgently, helping him to his feet. "Before anything else happens, we need to leave here immediately." But before they could leave, something caught Adaiba's eye. A chest in the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a curtain. Curious, she approached the chest and opened it. Inside, she found piles of gold, silver, precious and semi-precious stones, plus other treasures, more wealth than she had ever seen in her entire life. "Onuora, look Look at this, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Onuora joined her, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. This must be the witch's hoard, he said in awe. She must have collected it from the other victims over the years. Adaiba and Onuora were so excited. They were so excited. They had never seen such goodies, such precious stones before. With the witch gone, the house lost its eerie atmosphere, and a strange calmness settled over them. The once rotten pastries now crumbled into dust as they passed, and the thick, oppressive air had lifted, replaced by a cool breeze wafting through the now open windows. We have to go now, Adaiba urged. We have to go now. Her voice was steady, despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. She knew they couldn't linger in this cursed place any longer. Onuora nodded, still shaking, but regaining his composure. Together, they hurried out of the house, the heavy treasure sacks weighing them down, but doing little to slow their swift departure. The moment they stepped outside, the forest seemed to respond. The twisted trees slowly returned to their natural shapes, and the dark shadows retreating as the light began to filter through the leaves. The path ahead was clear. It was as if the forest itself was guiding them back to safety. They followed the trail. They were almost out of breath, but they were in very high spirits. The thrill of survival and the fortune they now carried pushed them even forward. And after what felt like hours, they finally broke through the forest's edge, emerging into a familiar trail. In the distance, they could see the other hikers as they rested and chatted, unaware of the ordeal that Adaiba and Onuora had just gone through. We made it, Onuora whispered, relief washing over him as he saw the group. Adaiba smiled, though her thoughts were still on the enchanted house. We did, and we are not leaving empty-handed, she replied. As they approached the group, the other hikers noticed them and rushed over, their faces filled with concern. Adaiba, Onuora, where have you been? We were so worried, one of the hikers exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. We got a bit lost, but we found our way back, Adaiba explained, her tone calm and collected. She exchanged a knowing glance with Onuora, silently agreeing not to mention the house or the witch. The story was too strange, too unbelievable, and they did not want to draw any unwanted attention to the treasure they had found. The group decided to cut the hike short, given the unexpected detour and the twins' exhaustion. As they made their way back to the village, Adaiba and Onuora remained quiet, their minds racing with thoughts of what they had just experienced. Back in their small village, the twins carefully hid the treasure in a secret spot only they knew. They knew that suddenly flaunting their newfound wealth would raise too many questions, and so they decided to use it sparingly, gradually improving their lives and helping those in need without attracting suspicion. Over time, they invested in their community, building schools, health centers, and improving infrastructure, all under the guise of a mysterious benefactor. The villagers were grateful, and though they wondered about the source of the wealth, they were careful not to ask too many questions. Adaiba and Onuora's lives changed, but they remained humble, always remembering the strange and terrifying experience that had brought them fortune.